Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Guys Who Stare at Stats. I'm Cade Kennedy alongside Gray and Andrew Santangelo, and we have a lot to get into today. So before we get going, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video, and as always, enjoy. So as we get started on an exciting day, the NBA draft is tonight. The NHL had Game 4, Colorado defeating Tampa Bay. The College World Series just got over with a little bit ago with a Game 7 to get our championship series set up. So we have a lot to get to today, but as always, first, how are you two doing today?
I can't really complain. Pretty much just been kind of looking forward to this, and obviously kind of see how the draft will turn out. But at least we finally got our finals for the College World Series for baseball, and two unexpected ones that no one thought would actually be there.
Yeah, no, I mean, just a good day. Nothing really too exciting, nothing bad, so can't complain. Forgot my watch, so it feels weird all day. It just feels like I've been missing something all day. But no, I'm excited to dive into some of this stuff.
Oh, and I will say that Game 4 was amazing for Avalanche and Lightning.
It was amazing for everyone that wasn't a Tampa Bay fan.
I know, that's why it was amazing.
But we'll get into that in a little bit. But the first thing to talk about in our returning coverage of Texas is officially back until they aren't back. Arch Manning has officially committed to Texas.
How much are they paying
The
him?
number one recruit, probably a lot. Number one recruit in 2023 class. Peyton Manning's been seen at a lot of Texas events, and every time he shows up, they lose. So, I mean, hey, show up to every game. Show up to every game, Peyton.
Yeah, he showed up to the OSU Texas game obviously last year in Austin, and he watched them blow that lead.
Yeah, he was at the College World Series this year. For softball, he was there for baseball, and what do you know? Every time he showed up, they lost. He needs to make a nice trip up to Lawrence, Kansas this year for football.
Kansas always beats Texas anyway.
Yeah, well, I mean, they got to have double magic, I guess.
Double.
But, I mean, everything that is seemingly expected here, the main battle was going to be Georgia, Alabama, or Texas. Arch Manning sending out the tweet. Coach Sarkisian quote tweeting it, saying the famous line of "all gas, no brakes" that Texas will continue to use for some reason. You would think after you go 5-7, you would just not do that again before getting memed to death. But here we are. So a potential situation that I've seen a lot of people talking about, you have Quinn Ewers this year for Texas. What happens if Texas goes like 9-3 or 8-4 in the regular season? And then you have Arch Manning coming. What do you do there? Because you have two 5-star quarterbacks. What do you do with that quarterback battle? Do you just let one of them transfer? Because that's more than likely what it seems like would happen.
Well, that's a good problem to have. So, I mean, yeah, you let them transfer. Obviously, you take the good year you had that season then, and then you move on from there. I mean, you don't really have control in this time period on who transfers. I mean, the transfer portal's here, so you got to be careful with that anyway. So, I mean, again, it's a good problem to have. You have two 5-star quarterbacks, obviously, but in the end, yeah, you're right. One of them's going to want playing time, so one of them's most likely to move. And, I mean, unless if it's in conference, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think they have really much control on that.
Well, I mean, there's also the scenario where Arch Manning decides to redshirt, though I don't think he'll want to do that. Getting there, he'll probably be trying to fight for that starting position, but never know. Quinn Ewers might get a total of 2 years at Texas before leaving, because if Arch Manning ever decided to redshirt, who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, for all I know, Arch Manning will want to play, and then you got to deal with a quarterback battle that who knows who that'll favor, because whoever loses out might transfer, or Arch Manning is willing to just go ahead and take a redshirt. Who knows?
Yeah, I think with all the media hype around him and kind of, this is the next great Manning quarterback in the dynasty that they've created, I find it hard to believe he would take a red shirt. I just feel like it's one of those things where we've built all of this up. You're not going to take a year off, not take a year off, but you get what I mean. You're not going to do that now. So I think it's just something kind of to think about as this college football season gets going in August.
Like, you can have all that hype in it, doesn't really mean much of anything.
Yeah.
It's just a bunch of hot air until it actually pays off. That's pretty much just how all hype is. Unless you can live up to it, it's just a bunch of hot air.
Yeah. But also Texas is back officially now for like the 5th time.
There?
And,
I wouldn't even call it the 5th time. They've been saying that since after Mac Brown left.
well, I mean, like, if we go down, like, official top 5 Texas is back moments, beating Georgia in the Sugar Bowl, playing OU close in 2019, playing OU close in 2020, playing OU close in 2021, having a 17-point lead on OSU for 1 minute in 2021. So I guess this would be number 6, unlike the Texas is back moments.
Well,
but,
their Texas back moment, I think, probably started with them beating OU in the Red River. So
yeah,
that
in
was
18, yeah.
That was there, and then they went on to have that beat Georgia.
I mean,
so I would probably put that as one of the moments on there.
I mean,
but obviously you don't forget that first one when they beat Notre Dame.
Yeah,
and then that
like
turned out both teams were trash.
Yes, it was the greatest. It was the greatest overhyped game in history, in recent history.
I mean, it was a great game to watch, but when you look back on those teams, it's pretty obvious that they weren't neither were that good.
It was the battle to go 5-7. But we have other news to get to. Just Woj just have his Twitter up today in case anything breaks. There have been a few things already reported. If Kyrie Irving cannot reach an agreement to stay with Brooklyn, he does have a list of teams he'd like to consider on sign-in trades. The Lakers, the Clippers, the Knicks, Heat, Mavs, and Sixers. None of those teams have the cap space to sign him without the help of the Brooklyn Nets. So, interesting there. You have those teams. If one of those 6 happens, what is the most likely one?
I think the most likely one would probably be the Lakers. I think he's played with LeBron. He obviously knows how that goes. He's going to want to go win. He likes the big spotlight, so LA obviously gives him the spotlight. Honestly, all those make sense. Like, in all honesty, all of them could use Kyrie. I know, obviously, he can be a headache at times, but he just can't be the guy. And on all those teams, none of them, well, maybe the Knicks to that exception, but outside of the Knicks, he's not the guy on any of those teams.
Yeah.
So, well, obviously Clippers pending health.
Yeah.
But, I mean, Sixers obviously have Harden and Embiid over them. Mavs, you have Luka. Heat, you have Jimmy Butler. Knicks, your biggest argument would be Julius Randle. Maybe at this stage of Kyrie's career, you could make the argument, but obviously career-wise, no. Clippers, if they're healthy, you have Paul George and Kawhi. And then Lakers, obviously, you have LeBron and Anthony Davis. So that would be a fun 3 too. LeBron Davis and LeBron.
Yeah, that would be.
It's
LeBron
like
Davis and Kyrie.
he would be the third guy for Lakers, Clippers, but I would say he'd probably be the second guy because he's putting up better. He's put up more solid numbers than Harden has been putting up. So he'd probably become a 2 guy. Everyone else obviously he'd be the second guy because you have Jimmy Butler. Being the guy, and then you have Luka Doncic with the Mavs. Then obviously with the Knicks, he'd be the number 1, but you have to still. That's not necessarily a win. He'd just be getting money because he's not going to be competing for a championship unless the Knicks can get it together.
Yeah, who want to sell the Knicks though? Are they paying that much for? Like, I don't even think they have that many guys to say that they don't have the cap space. Like, I'm trying to think like which guy on the Knicks are you sending off to make that cap even?
Yeah, maybe you trade Randall. I don't know.
But, like, who else is, like, handicapping them where they don't have...
Well, this might be a scenario where
Let's see what they got.
Mavs might make another move, but they'll have to eat some money with the help of the Nets.
The only way I like the Mavs doing this if we somehow find a way to fleece them, which would involve not trading Jalen Brunson, and there's like a 0.0001% chance that would happen.
Out of all those teams, those are teams he'd like to play. Like he's considering he wanted to play for, but it's like the Mavs are just not going to work because they just don't. It's like you're already trying to re-sign Jalen Brunson, and you're still running into issues where they just don't have the cap to deal with that. And then Lakers, there's really nothing for them to trade besides having to get rid of Russell Westbrook, and that's just not happening.
Man, the Knicks got a lot of bad contracts.
Yeah, that's
Julius Randle's got $23 million. Evan Fournier's got $18 million a year. Derrick Rose is $14 a year. They're already paying R.J. Barrett over 10, basically $11 million a year. Alec Burks is getting $10 million, and Nerlens Noel is getting $9 million. All those guys are making more than Kemba Walker, and I'd say Kemba Walker's better than everybody I just mentioned.
Yeah.
Outside of Randle.
Yeah.
Well, that's what happens in New York. You got to get somebody to sign.
I think out of all these teams, the Heat and Sixers he could probably make something work. The they can make a Kyle Lowry trade, trade Kyle Lowry, but the Nets have to pay for a fair amount of the contract. I mean, I think for the Heat, I think for the Nets, you don't have to pay as much if you work with the Heat, but you still have to help them out.
Yeah.
But it's really hard to say with these other teams because they're not necessarily in the best spot to really to take them. So I think for the Nets' interest is somehow getting a deal in, but then again, who knows how that will turn out.
Yeah, we still have a little bit of time to see if Kyrie makes that deal or not. We still got nearly a week to see what happens there. And then moving over to Shams, because we also have our other favorite NBA reporter. You're either a Woj guy or a Shams guy. There's no other options. And Shams reporting that Kevin Durant is monitoring the Brooklyn Nets situation, considering his options with the future. This now opens up the path for Irving to proceed on finding a new home via a sign and trade. So just some interesting stuff there. We might actually be seeing the death of the Nets. And what do you know? The second Ben Simmons gets traded there. Everything goes wrong.
I wonder why.
I wonder why.
This might be, Cade, you would have said it to me when I first got here. It might have been right when I was leaving the office. But you also got to be careful with this because this doesn't mean Durant's ready to get out.
Correct.
He's also willing to see what the Nets' plan is once Kyrie is gone. So if they have a good plan to replace Kyrie and company, you could still get Kevin Durant.
That's gonna be a hard thing to replace, though.
Well, not really. I mean, if you trade Kyrie and you're able to get Jalen Brunson in that deal, if you're going to get a Tyrese Maxey from the Sixers and a Tobias Harris in that deal, I mean, you're shaping up pretty good. So Kyrie's good. It's not like Kyrie's going to give you nothing. Kyrie's going to bring in some pretty good pieces and open up cap space to sign a ton in free agency.
I'm just not sure how. It's mainly how those players will initially turn out because. Jalen Brunson's been playing solid for the Mavs, but not necessarily it wasn't really their number 2 guy.
He was the number 2 guy. Once Tim
I'm talking
Hardaway
about
got
I'm talking
hurt.
about when everyone's at full strength, he's not that number 2 guy.
Yeah, we'll have to see how next year works for Dallas. But I mean, with the way he played in the postseason, he very well could be the number 2 guy. Just the way the Mavs kind of fluctuated and kind of lived and died with trades and injuries. Of course, there can't be a number 2 guy when everyone's playing their own third of the season.
Well, my point is too. You don't have to get a number 2 guy. If hypothetically, let's say you trade Kyrie, you open up all that space. You're bringing in, let's just say Jalen Brunson. Let's say Kyrie goes to the Mavs for Jalen Brunson, another contract piece, but again, you're going to open up a ton of ton of cap space. So anyway, the spot here is. First off, you got Ben Simmons coming back. And I know it's funny to rip on him and make fun of him, but in reality, we got to remember he's still an All-NBA player and an All-Star. So he's still going to solidify that defense. And again, it all depends on what they get. If you bring in a Kyle Lowry and a Duncan Robinson from the Heat, and you're going to roll out Kyle Lowry, Duncan Robinson, Durant, you re-sign Andre Drummond as your center, I mean, that's still a pretty good team, especially in the East.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how this works out for the Nets. And then Evan Sittery reporting that DeAndre Ayton reportedly would embrace forming a new dynamic duo with Cade Cunningham on the Pistons per the Stein line.
Probably could see some form of trade happening.
Yeah, this very well could happen, I think, in the near future. This could happen as soon as tonight even, with how Phoenix is trying to get something done. It sounds like they want a deal done. I could see the Ayton trade being pulled tonight. It very well could happen.
Well, you know where the Detroit's at. So if you're the Suns, you're saying, give me number 5. And then you can maybe you're not going to find another DeAndre Ayton right away, but someone that might be able to come close to it. And, I mean, listen, as far as being paired with Cade Cunningham, obviously as a young player, he probably would have won Rookie of the Year if he didn't get off to a slow month. That first month was a little rough for him, kind of transitioning, and then he took off. So without that, he's probably your Rookie of the Year. So, I don't blame DeAndre Ayton one to pair with a guy like that.
Especially there's a lot of, obviously, the upside for Cade, especially if Cade can keep up that momentum, which I believe he will be able to for the least next 5 to 8 years. I think that'd be a great dynamic duo for probably say about for that 5-year run there together, because Cade was probably never going to leave Detroit unless he regresses really badly.
No, I completely agree. Flipping that to the Pistons side, my concern if I'm Detroit, though, is, it's going to take more than that. Yeah. Obviously, just the number 5, they get a guy like DeAndre Ayton.
Yeah.
So my concern is how much else are you giving up? Because don't forget, you already got rid of Grant. So Cade, I know Cade and Aiden are both on the younger side.
Yeah.
But you got to be careful. Both their obviously DeAndre Ayton's contract's up soon. Cade, you already used a year, so how much is he going to be willing to stay in Detroit? I mean, you'll have 3 years left on that rookie deal. That's going to be a pretty quick turnaround. You might be in danger of losing a guy like Cade, too, if you're not able to make that quick, if you're giving up a lot for Aiden, because you're probably going to give up more than just the 5th pick, so you lose a lot more of your future as well.
Yeah, so you're going to give some depth up there for them, but
maybe
this always seems to happen. I mean, if you could somehow get away with just the 5th pick, trading some depth and all that, the real thing I want to see is how good would that Pistons team, because we're not talking like top 3 in the East, obviously, but, could they be able to get like a 6, 7, or 8 or something like that? I feel like that's where they would be at least that first year running that everything goes well for them.
Yeah, if things do go well for them for most of that season, they have a shot at least doing a play-in. I don't see them going any higher than 8.
Yeah, I'm trying to run through the teams in my head. I think you had 6 with Chicago. So you're facing a Levine, DeRozan when healthy. I don't view that, Cade and DeAndre Ayton better than that, so I agree with you, Connor. I think it'd be more of a playing game style,
yeah.
Maybe you get up to the 8, but yeah, I'd say, because you had the Nets at 7 or 8 last
year,
right?
Well,
So,
we also don't know what the Nets are going to do. We don't know.
No, I'm saying, I'm just comparing it to like a team like that. You got to remember, and I get they had problem after problem, but in the end, you either had Harden or Kyrie or Durant still on the floor at all times, basically. So I got at least one of them is what I'm saying. So I'd say, I view them as an 8 to 10 range.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see for sure.
And that also amounts to how much do they have to give up with their trade, because they have to give up some depth. That might actually hurt them down the stretch of the season.
That's what I was saying. Best case scenario for Detroit would be like a 6, 7, or 8. More realistically, probably an 8 to 10.
Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously I've never been in a front office, but
maybe one day.
Yeah, maybe. My one question, like always, would be to one of them is, like, if you're the Pistons here, right? You see how upset DeAndre Ayton is, and I guess it's the fear of where else he would go.
Yeah.
But hypothetically, obviously, we're all sitting here saying it's probably going to take more than the 5. Why would you give up? I don't know. Say it's a 5, a first next year, and I don't know, 2 role players. Like, that's a lot, obviously. So, like, if you know he's upset, you know he's going to leave, he's going to be a free agent here in a little bit.
Just wait it out.
Isn't it kind of crazy to think about, like, they trade? And it's probably, again, the fear of another team giving it up, so you want to make sure you get him.
Yeah.
But, like, we're talking about here, like, yeah, you get DeAndre Ayton, you're not fixing all your problems. And then if you give up all that extra stuff, might not make your team better in the long run.
I think if I know obviously it's just a report, so we don't know what DeAndre Ayton actually really does feel. Though, obviously, if you're Detroit and they do have the cap space for it, you might be able to give him that contract he wants. Plus, obviously, like the pairing with Cade Cunningham is very interesting.
Yeah, it is definitely interesting to see. One final piece of NBA news before we get into if anything breaks live, we just break it live. But Dane Moore reporting that he's been saying for the past month, everything he's heard, there's over a 50% chance that D'Angelo Russell is traded from the Timberwolves this season. Conversations with a few non-T-Wolves sources suggest that a Russell trade is now even more likely tonight through the first week of July. So expect possibly some news about that happening, which would be interesting because you have a big 3 there in Minnesota set up with Russell, Edwards, and Towns. So I don't know what you would be trying to get out of Russell. I mean, obviously you get something, but I don't know what exactly they're going for. Are they going for more depth? Are they going for a 3rd star again? I think it'll be interesting to see what they try to do.
Without question. Based off of his past history, something tells me there's a problem inside the locker room.
Probably.
Because like you said, Cade, they already they've shaped up a big 3. You had a big run in terms of Minnesota. You got to the postseason last year. It seems like an odd timing, especially the day of the draft. It could just be a rumor because that's what happens on draft day. Or, here again, to me, this tells me something's a little iffy behind the scenes. We've seen that with Russell in the past. I'm surprised it doesn't tell you like who would be interested. I would see a lot of his suitors very similar to Kyrie. And honestly, I don't know if you guys disagree with me, but I'd say throw those same teams up in the Clippers, the Lakers, the Sixers, the Mavs, Knicks and Heat. Yeah. Those would be my honestly top suitors for him too.
In terms of contract, wouldn't D'Angelo Russell's be more favorable to teams because it's not as big, or is he on a max?
Off the top of my head, I'd say I have to agree with you.
Because I mean, like,
But
he's
Minnesota could be
he's a great player, but I don't think he's ever been given a big contract.
I know there was like the whole when he was with the Nets. I know he signed a big contract with the Warriors, and then he was with the Warriors for like a year, and then found his way in Minnesota, and that's how we got the Wiggins trade. But I really don't know. I mean, like you said, Andrew, it's probably a locker room thing. But how about that storyline? Instead of Kyrie reuniting with LeBron, how about Russell returns to L.A.? You also got an interesting storyline there.
If I'm LA, I'd rather Russell. I mean, honestly, like Connor said, I mean, I think he'll be a little cheaper. The package you have to give up is probably a little less.
And then you get Westbrook and Beverly on the same team for 1 minute.
He's on 4 years, $117 million. So he's basically getting 28. Well, he'll get 28. He got 28 the first 2 years. These next 2 years, he's gonna get 30 and 31.
Okay, so a little bit cheaper than Kyrie.
Because isn't like Kyrie like around like over 35 or something like that?
Yeah. And then he's a free agent in 2023. So that is a downside to this. You don't have much team control over him. So he'll be a free agent after next season, 2022, 2023.
Yeah.
Yep. Bit of a downside there. But now it's time to talk a little bit about hockey. 3-2, Colorado beating Tampa Bay in Game 4. The Avs holding on and doing what they do best. Just playing aggressive and playing to win. And that's what they got to do in another OT win for the Avs, officially 1 game away from a Stanley Cup.
You know, it's amazing how the start of the game versus how it ended. It on the aggressiveness of both teams, it flip-flopped.
Yes.
Because Tampa was like I remember they were saying like they had like it was like 9 shots on goal to 2 for in favor of Tampa. And that kept rising up as the first period ended.
Yeah, at one point it was like 17-4 or something.
Yeah, it was
insane.
bad. And then Colorado obviously changed that in the second period where they scored, but they're still down 2-1. And then that third period was just entirely different Avalanche team. Tampa was literally just fighting to hold the lead. And obviously they failed. And then, my goodness, that overtime period was amazing. Just the constant aggressiveness by both teams. Mainly, Avs were obviously very aggressive in that category, but gosh darn, that was a fun game to watch.
And then Nazem Kadri, first game back, wins the game for the Avs, getting one of the weirdest goals of all time where it bounces off of Vasilevsky and gets stuck in the top of the net. And it got stuck, so the sensor never triggered the goal. So everyone was just kind of standing there like, what do we do? The Avs players are celebrating. The Tampa players are just like, what happened?
Yeah,
everyone thought it got stuck.
It took about 5 to 8 seconds for the Avs to realize it went in the goal.
Yeah, because I was like, where did that go? That's got to be one of the greatest saves I've seen. That just teleported into Vasilevsky. And it was like, oh, Colorado scored. The game's over.
Yeah, I was like, I also thought Vasilevsky made a save on that. I was like, wait, what's going on? Why did everyone stop moving? And then all of a sudden, I was thinking that, he stopped it. And then I saw the Avs celebrate. I'm like, oh, my God, that actually went in the goal.
Yeah.
I think he thought he saved it.
Yeah.
I mean, he obviously felt it hit him, and then I think he thought he trapped it underneath his arm or something because he was laying there. Everybody was looking around, so nobody really knew who was in until, the Avs kind of just circled around each other. But I think the Lightning off to a fast start. I think you're seeing the 3 years in the finals start to hit them. They're never gonna agree to it, but they look a little bit slower than I'm used to watching Tampa Bay Lightning look. I think the track and the wear on them is starting to get up to them. They just look a little bit slower than usual, and obviously that's not going to go well in Colorado because from probably halfway through the third period to the end of the game, it was all Avalanche. I mean, it was taking a lot of great Tampa Bay saves and a lot of Tampa Bay defensive stops to keep that game going. So to me, it was only a matter of time. And, of course, unfortunately, it ends on controversy too.
Yeah. And one thing that was really odd is obviously for first time in the series, Tampa actually led in shots, but they they lost on the hits aspect, which is usually there in favor of them.
Yeah, so they flipped.
And then they pretty much evened up on everything. And it was not a lot of penalties, not a lot of power plays.
Yeah, it was a combined 8 penalty minutes in the entire game for both teams. Like you said, Connor, 41-29, the hits favoring the Avs. 35-35 on faceoffs. What a nice even number there. And 39-37, Tampa Bay beating Colorado on shots. Something we will probably not see for the rest of the series. You got your one time. This is what I said Tampa Bay had to do. They have to win here and here. They got to win shots and hits You finally won shots, but you got beat on hits.
Yeah, I think with the Avalanche in the third and overtime, just much more aggressive. I mean, don't get me wrong, Tampa in overtime played close to where Avalanche was, but it wasn't on the same level. But because that third period, Tampa was just trying everything they could, was playing very defensive, despite the fact it was like you needed another goal to keep the Avalanche out of reach, and obviously didn't happen. But it was just a really fun game. It's refreshing after two blowouts, and obviously we got something similar to that first game, but it's going to be really hard for Tampa to try to come back from this, especially if you can somehow go to Game 7. You got to play in Colorado twice.
Yeah.
That's if they can somehow win in Colorado.
There's only been one time ever a 3-1 lead has been blown. In 1942, when the Toronto Maple Leafs came back from a 3-1 deficit to win the Stanley Cup. So that brings us to Game 5, 7 o'clock, Friday night on ABC. Avs are heavier favorites in this one. This is a 175 number. This is the highest I've seen it in a while for Colorado. Over-under still set at 6, as you would expect. And this is going to be a battle. This is going to be the uphill climb for Tampa Bay. If they even have a shot, what are they going to have to do? Because you saw them play physical, and that worked in Game 3. But you saw Colorado match the physicality, won the battle, got the hits. And Colorado was able to beat them with their own strategy in Game 4.
I think it also kind of shows that Colorado can play just as physical and not have to rely as much on their speed. Like obviously, their speed is what is the most important, but they show they can hit you right back in the mouth just as much as you can hit them. So that's one where Colorado takes that going into Game 5. It's going to be really hard. They're not going to be too difficult to stop. But obviously Vasilevsky had a brilliant night in regards to his goalkeeping and the defense on both sides stepped up big time after both squads had really a lot of issues on the defensive side for Game 2 and 3, obviously flip-flopping. But it's going to be more interesting with the goalie matchup in regards to can Vasilevsky still do what he did in Game 4, because he played really well. And then obviously Kemper was going to have to try to match that, because I feel like out of the two, he's not the best. Kemper's not the best goalie, but he did enough to avoid really any issues.
Yeah, also when you have that offense behind you, you can afford to let a few slip in. You know, you can give up 3 if your team's going to score 7.
But obviously that's something I think last night was Kemper really did a great job. He probably played his best game as a goalie. But we're just going to see, will they flip to backup goalies, or will they still keep their main guys?
Yeah.
Because if they switch
I expect them to keep the main guys.
Okay. Yeah. It's like, I figure, I know that's probably what's going to be the case, but they've flipped goalies before, so they guys don't get exhausted.
Yeah.
But obviously Kemper and Vasilevsky should play again.
Yeah, so
that's a great goalie matchup.
Mm-hmm. Looking at the injury report, Kucherov, Cernak, and Cirelli now all listed as day-to-days. Braden Point officially out for Game 5 as of right now. Kadri still day-to-day. We saw him play in Game 4. I would think he'd play in Game 5. And Burakovsky also listed as out.
Yeah, Kadri probably won't. Obviously, he'll play, but either they'll probably not have him out there as much, or they'll give him his regular minutes.
Yeah.
And obviously, getting his first game back, literally the game-winning goal. Yes. So that's something
that's usually a positive sign.
Yeah.
But this brings me to the question: does Colorado finish it off in Game 5, or does Tampa Bay find a way to keep fighting another day? With everything going Colorado's favor, you got the 3-1 lead. You know the history behind it. You know where you stand. If you're Tampa Bay, can you start the road to the comeback?
Can you start it?
Yes.
But does it happen?
No, I don't think it happens. Colorado's going to go back home. They'll take advantage of the home ice. Again, they look a lot quicker at this point. Tampa looks a little bit beat. Again, it's been a very odd series going from overtime to 2 blowouts back to overtime. So it's an odd good, interesting series, whatever word you want to use. You can probably use any word you want with the way it's been going.
By the way, we have Philly news that just dropped, so you're...
Yeah, I saw it. So I was waiting until we finished the NHL to bring it up. I did see it. So, no, I think Colorado will finish this series off. I think it's going to be similar to Game 4, though. I know it's been a lot of high-scoring stuff, but I think the defense and the goalies have started to figure things out here recently in these last few games. So I'll go. I think Colorado finishes out, and I'll say a similar score around the 3-2, 4-2 range.
I would say in regards to how Colorado has been playing throughout the whole series, they're going to go back to how they played games 1 through 3 and have the shots advantage. They're going to be more aggressive because obviously they're much more aggressive at home, and they're just going to be so hard to stop. I mean, you have single-digit losses for their entire home run, so obviously they're going to be too difficult to stop in my opinion. Obviously, Vasilevsky and Cooper are going to have a great goalie matchup. I think Vasilevsky will give his heart out there and give the best performance he can, but in the end of the day, it will not be enough to prevent like maybe 4 goals, because I think the defense for Tampa is just gonna get ran out the building. That's just, I mean, it's like I also expect Tampa to try to match them in the offense, which they can in some aspects, but Colorado's going to be too much for them. I think Colorado will finish it off the series and win their first Stanley Cup since 2001.
Yeah, I think Colorado finishes it off. I wouldn't be surprised if you see the Avs get a goal or two in the first period, if it just snowballs from there and you see Colorado try to get back to that 7-0 game we saw in Game 2. I don't think it will happen. I think Tampa Bay will put up a bit of a fight, but Colorado is going to continue to wear them down over the series. So I think Colorado takes it in 5, and the dynasty ends.
Wait, you're going away from your Tampa Bay
I'm
method?
going away from Tampa.
What?
My Tampa every time.
Breaking news.
The breaking news. I'm done. I can't do it anymore. I want to pick Tampa. I really want to pick them, but
no. Watch this. Colorado somehow loses, and then he'll go back to picking Tampa.
Yeah,
for the rest of the series.
Colorado loses. I will pick Tampa in Game 6. That will absolutely happen. But I think Colorado finishes it off. It's been a good run, Tampa Bay, but I said it when we got to Game 1. Either Pat Maroon's streak of 4 in a row was going to stay alive, or Corey Perry was going to lose 3 in a row. It's looking like Corey Perry's going to win out over Pat Maroon in this one. I think Colorado gets it done, and it's over in 5, and we have a new champion, and the run is over for Tampa Bay.
Hey, well, I think it's over. I hope it's not, because I just want to keep watching it.
Yeah, it's like this has been an amazing series. I wish it would go to 7 games, but I just don't think Colorado wants to deal with that.
I mean,
especially because that Tampa will have all that momentum going back to Game 7.
Yeah, I'll say if you get it back to a Game 7, you got to actually look out for that a bit.
Yep.
But one final thing I'm going to put – actually, I'm just going to stay right here so I can break the news, because the Sixers are trying to acquire Eric Gordon using Matisse Thybulle as an asset, even attempting to get a third team to participate, according to multiple league sources. The Blazers are willing to make a straight-up deal for Thybulle, according to sources.
Ooh.
So, Andrew, as our local Philadelphia 76ers fan, how do you feel about this?
I mean, I'm fine with it. I mean, I know a lot of Philadelphia fans are going to be upset if Thybulle's traded. I honestly think it's more of a when than if at this point in the offseason, not necessarily tonight. But I know a lot of fans are going to be upset, because he's become a fan favorite. But I think a big thing is sometimes you got to put the fan favorite aside of what's best for the team. And I think, obviously it's always nice getting some young guys and, again, having that fan favorite. But at this point, the young bench hasn't worked. So at this point, you have to find a way to go get some veteran bench pieces on the team, even if it's older. Now's the time to go in for those 2 old bench pieces and go after the win, kind of like you saw the Bucks. I mean, in the long run, it didn't work for the Heat, but you saw the Heat do with Tucker, and he helped both those teams out going on playoff runs. So I think that's what the Sixers are looking for here with Eric Gordon or even possibly Tucker that they've been linked to this offseason. So that's what the Sixers are going to go for this offseason, and I think that's the first step there with Gordon. I do say it's interesting that the Blazers are willing to do a straight-up for Thybulle, because, I mean, Gordon's on the Rockets, so I'm curious who on Portland's side they're trying to go on for the Thybulle. That'd be I don't know what they're willing to give up. I don't know. I really don't know.
The guy I would say they already got rid of
last year at the deadline. So I'd be interested to see who Portland's trying to give us for that.
Yeah, I really don't know either. I did see a funny comment that I don't know if you'll agree with this, Andrew, but the Philadelphia Rockets may or not be in order. I mean, you got James Harden, you got Eric Gordon, you're going after P.J. Tucker. All you need is Chris Paul and Clint Capella, and you're on your way.
Well, we didn't get Gordon yet. It's just a rumor.
If you get Gordon, and P.J. Tucker,
we know the GM is president of operations. Not the GM, but is the former Rocket.
Yes, it's more.
No, I mean, I want Tucker and Gordon. I mean, obviously it always depends on what you give up. But no, Tucker and Gordon is better than anything we got on the bench right now. So I'd be willing to try to go after it. That's been the biggest weak link for the Sixers, I think, the last 4 years. Everyone can poke the fun at Simmons and everything and the coaching and stuff, but in the end, your bench is. I mean, when you take out Embiid and some of the starters, you just can't keep up, and that's where you lose every game.
Yep.
Yeah, that can absolutely happen, and it's finally time to not talk about basketball or hockey.
We're about to talk about baseball.
We're about to not talk about baseball by talking about baseball. That's what we do on this show. But Oklahoma and Ole Miss is officially set as our College World Series championship game. Oklahoma beating Texas A&M 5-1 yesterday. Ole Miss losing 3-2 to Arkansas yesterday, but Ole Miss coming back with a complete game shutout to win 2-0 today to get Oklahoma Saturday night at 6:00.
In fact, Ole Miss's pitching staff has been doing really, really well. They were able to hold off a red hot hitting core to only giving up 3 runs in those 2 games.
Yeah,
obviously I know they played them the 3 times already. Ole Miss has played Arkansas 3 times, but that's still you only gave up for those 2 games after they came off hitting 11 off Auburn. That just shows the pitching staff showed up to play. Mm-hmm. Obviously, they're hitting. They have some solid hitters throughout the core, but obviously that's going to be a challenge where you're going to need them to step up because you're going to be dealing with an OU team that has got some solid bats. Obviously, not always consistently there, but they've managed to always get more than 5 runs for almost every single game they played in. Obviously, they put up the 13 initially up on A&M the first time they played. But obviously pitching staff for OU as the tournament has gone on has just gotten better. Yeah. So we'll see how those teams will clash when they finally play Saturday.
Yeah. One question I do have for you: both of you, what would you say is the biggest surprise so far of the College World Series?
Like a total, or from these 2 teams?
From the entire bracket we've seen so far, all the way down to the final 2. What has been the biggest thing that has surprised you?
For me, mainly Arkansas's bats going cold when they needed it most. Because they were almost every team they went up against, Arkansas knocked the piss out of them, and yet all of a sudden they go cold against Ole Miss. That would be my only surprise. Not really. I'd say there really wasn't much surprises because of just how the way this entire postseason has gone. Because you just have teams that are just going red hot at the right time, and you have teams that should have made it get eliminated early. So it's not really a lot of surprises. It's more of like you've kind of figured certain teams should have played a little better than they did, but that's just how it rolls.
I would say the amount of early upsets and then the offense as a whole in the College World Series has surprised me the most. I think something you've seen, I think something we've seen is from the better teams is a lot of times their pitching will be able to mow them down and keep, and then their bats obviously eventually we get to the less team that isn't ranked or so. And I think this year the bats really jumped out overall in the World Series in the early parts of the regional, the later stages as well, and then even in Omaha you've seen a lot of offenses as well. So I think that's the big story for me is the amount of early upsets you saw from a lot of those teams, and then the overall offensive standpoint.
I would say from particular teams, their hit, like in regards to getting runs, it decreased over time, but their pitching for each of their squads stepped up in a big way to help keep their team. Like for OU, bats got a red hot pitching initially started off well, but obviously were giving up a lot of runs, and then all of a sudden their pitching got much better overtime. And same Ole Miss overall had great pitching staff throughout the whole thing. I mean, the most runs in a game they gave up was the 5 runs to Arkansas, where they were able to keep a red hot hitting core down. Mm-hmm. That's where this is going to probably. I feel like it's not really going to be a hitting contest in regards to getting runs. It feels like it's going to be more of a pitching duel between staffs on how well Ole Miss and OU can go. Obviously, OU can be shaky, but they've also have played really well when you need them to. Obviously, starting pitching has played much better, has been throwing much better, and Ole Miss for most of the postseason has been consistently pitching well.
Yeah. So it'll be fun to see. I would say my biggest surprise is just the amount of blowouts we've had.
Yeah.
Or in terms of 4-run games that are technically within a few swings away of being a tied game, but
they don't necessarily feel like it.
When you look at it, like Notre Dame, Texas felt like a blowout most of the game. Oklahoma, Texas A&M was a blowout for 7 innings until A&M made it close. Texas A&M blew out Texas in an elimination game. Arkansas blew out Stanford. Auburn, it felt like blew out Stanford. Yes, it was 6-2, but it didn't really feel like 6-2.
Stanford really didn't really do much of anything.
Yeah, they really did.
Besides their 2 runs, they couldn't really do anything.
Look here, Ole Miss blows out Arkansas. Then Arkansas blew out Auburn. We finally got 2 good games back-to-back with Ole Miss and Arkansas. But OU did the same thing to Notre Dame and the same thing to A&M. They kind of just didn't blow them out of the water, but did enough and just put their foot down pitching-wise. You're not coming back in this game.
I mean, OU jumped up for A&M for that final one in that top of the bracket. Jumped up 3-0, got a big 3-run home run early. Then A&M put a run up on the board, and then OU just eventually got up by 4, and then pitching staff just made sure A&M couldn't do anything.
Yeah, Sandlin and Michael showed up there to stop them in their tracks. So the final question, since we'll be off while the championship series goes on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, is who wins the championship series and in how many games, 2 or 3?
I would say I wouldn't be surprised if this goes to 3 at all. I mean, if it ends in 2, that's going to amount to the pitching staffs for each squad just did amazing. Then, of course, then you could say OU hit well. Mm-hmm. I think between the both teams, the way it's – I mean, can Ole Miss hit well? Yes. They did it against Arkansas, who had a solid pitching staff. But Ole Miss for overall hasn't necessarily been relying on their bats to get them through games. That's mainly been their pitching that's helped them. While as OU, in most of their games, their hitting has come through when the occasional pitching might falter, but most part, they haven't had to worry about the pitching staff as much. I mean, obviously you had to go through some pitchers for that first game, but that's because A&M tried to make it close near the end. But didn't really struggle against Notre Dame, and they didn't really struggle against A&M the second time they played them. So it's just one of those where I think OU's pitching has been able to get them through when the hitting gets them out on an early lead. That's where I think OU is going to need to be more reliable. If they can jump out early, it'll come down to their pitching staff helping them out. But if their pitching staff falters, expect Ole Miss to make that a game right away or overtake them. It's really hard to favor because both teams are playing red hot.
So regardless of the outcome, I think it's going to go 3 games. I think regardless of who wins, it's going to go 3. I'm going to pick Oklahoma in 3. I like their team top to bottom better than Ole Miss's. I think it's tough, though. I think Oklahoma's the better offense. I would lean Ole Miss pitching-wise. I know Oklahoma's been very good here in Omaha, but I think overall Ole Miss. But I think Oklahoma's good. My one concern for Oklahoma is they haven't really been tested close. They've been jumping out to big leads. You saw it in the Notre Dame, the A&M. The Texas A&M game again. I mean, you're jumping out. I think that first one was like 12-2 or something like that. Notre Dame, I think, was 5-1. And Texas A&M was 5-0, I think. And that's my concern for Oklahoma. If Ole Miss jumps out to a 2-0 lead to start in the first 2 innings or something, how does OU respond? But I think Oklahoma will be fine. I think it's gonna be a great series, though. I don't think it's gonna either. I don't think any of these games will be blowouts. I think you'll see a lot of about 6 to 5, somewhere in those ranges. I don't think you're going to get the 13 to 12 scores, but I'm going to go OU in 3 games here, and they'll hoist the trophy.
We'll probably see a game. We'll probably see a game, maybe 2, where no one hits any higher than 3. Just the way both pitching staffs have played.
Possibly.
And it's like, I think, like you said, OU's hitting staff is better. I believe better top to bottom is better than Ole Miss's, but we also have to remember Ole Miss managed to hit well off a really good Arkansas staff, who for the most part was pitching very well to a Stanford team that was mainly helped by their hitting core. So that's where, and also they only held Auburn to 1 run, so that shows just how good Arkansas was good pitching and defense, and their defense was. But I think for this one, I'll be the odd one out here because I know who Cade's going to pick. But I'm going to pick Ole Miss in 3. I think Ole Miss's pitching will be too much for OU to overcome. I think Ole Miss in the 2 games they need to win will squeeze them out.
All right. Well, like you said, you're correct. You do know who I'm going to pick. I'm going to pick Oklahoma to beat Ole Miss. I think in 3 games, of course. I don't think it's going to – if it's a 2-game sweep, I will be shocked either way. I think Oklahoma got the biggest break they possibly could in Arkansas beating Ole Miss in Game 6 of their bracket. Because now Oklahoma will throw Jake Bennett Game 1. Ole Miss is not going to be able to throw their ace. He just threw the game of his life, basically. He threw a complete game shutout. You
probably won't see him until maybe late Game 2 or
so
pitching
you
Game 3.
might see him as a relief guy in Game 2 or something like that. But I think Oklahoma will find a way to take Game 1. Ole Miss has had some good pitching. But to me, they kind of remind me of Notre Dame in the way they're built, that if their bats get hot, it's going to be a rough day for you with how their pitching can play. But at the same time, if you can just kind of keep them down as long as you can, if you can go through the game, get a couple of runs, you'll be fine. You can squeeze a 4-2, 3-2, 3-1 type of game out against them.
That's where I think OU that not necessarily favor OU, but that's a way to win because just the way Ole Miss has pitched most of this entire World Series, it's going to be hard for OU's bats to really get anything because I think it's going to be the toughest pitching staff they're going to face. Though just with the way the teams are at the time, I think you go from top to bottom with all the college teams. Ole Miss probably wouldn't have been looked at as a great pitching staff, but just the way they've thrown the entire postseason, I'd say they're the toughest right now.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because, David Sandlin played the best game of his career against Texas A&M. He threw for 7 innings there, 12 strikeouts. I will be interested to see if OU's pitchers can one-up themselves because you're dealing with a lot of sophomores and freshmen in your rotation. I want to see what Skip does in terms of if OU does get into a jam, what do you do with the bullpen? Because the bullpen is the one thing I've been worried about for OU most of the year. Usually we have one plan, pray that the starting pitcher goes 7 innings, bring Trevin Michael in the 8th and 9th to finish it. If OU can do that, they have a very good shot of winning this championship. However, if you get into OU's bullpen, there is no telling what happens because we haven't seen any of them in a month. So we don't know. They could come out and throw amazing. They could come out and play horrible. So I think if you're Ole Miss, that's your key to winning this series. I just don't think it'll happen. I think Oklahoma takes it in 3 and becomes the first ever school to win baseball and softball in the same year, which would be really fun for me personally.
Credit to them.
I'm just happy they made
to that team, but I do not want to deal with this guy.
Yeah, I'm sure you don't want to.
I don't want. So I'm hoping it doesn't happen.
Yeah. Well, I disagree. That's the only thing I can say there is I disagree.
Well, it's okay to be wrong.
I know. That's why God made Texas fans. But that will do it for tonight. I want to give one final look here on NBA news, if I can find literally anything to report on. But it looks like there's nothing else that I can find trending immediately.
As soon as we go off the air, it's
and then we'll go off the air, and 5 minutes later, like D'Angelo Russell or Kyrie will get traded or something like that.
I did see last night that the Blazers were highly willing to give up the 7th pick.
Yeah, I did.
I saw they were trying to give it to who was it? Was it Toronto? I think they're trying to trade to Toronto for. Was it OG Anoli or something like that? I forget how to say his name, but I was reading they were in talks to do that. So it's funny. I feel like Portland's I feel like they're trying more than ever to make Damian happy after trading CJ McCollum. You think they'd want to make both of them happy? Yeah. But it seems like since the CJ trade, they're doing so much more to try to make that team better.
Yeah, it feels like they're trying to get stuff done there. We'll see because the NBA draft in 37 minutes officially from where we get off the air. But as always, we thank you for tuning in for another episode of The Guys Who Stare at Stats. If you enjoyed this, feel free to give us a follow here on Twitch. Like the video when it comes out on YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channels, whether it be NWTV7 or The Guys Who Stare at Stats. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok at NWTV7. For Andrew Santangelo and Connor Gray, I am Cade Kennedy. Enjoy the draft tonight, and have a great night, everybody.